Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 RE/MAX agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and number of homes sold. He's also the author of the book, The Real Deal, Billion-Dollar Real Estate Broker. Listeners, if you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, start by going to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or through email, Faisal@homeshack.com. Faisal, we knew that there was some excitement in the last little while. The federal government makes another announcement about cuts to interest rates, and there's the economists all weigh in and they start to say, okay, well, we're going to see this surge in the housing market. What's really happening? What are you seeing happening? And we know that there's going to be another announcement in December. How will we finish off 2024?
We're already seeing the positive impact of the October 23rd rate cut leading into the December 11th. We're seeing that pent-up demand entering the marketplace now. Folks are realizing that they're better off to, take a variable rate right now and still enjoy the ability to get a little bit of a better deal than they will next year. Look, we've seen in the past, as rates go down, prices will go up. There's no working around that. And in addition to that, the government incentives have started to come in with a 30-year amortization. And we're seeing that CMHC now, as of mid-December, will allow insured mortgages to hit 1.5 million. So that buyer who was restricted to a $1 million purchase with, say, 10% down will now be able to go to 1.5 million. So, you talk about $200,000, say, above what their original cap was. They've got to come up with another $20,000 as opposed to come up with the $200,000. So we're going to see that also play a huge role in when we see bidding wars. People will not drop out at that $1 million mark. They'll continue going because they now have the support of CMHC behind them via the insured mortgages. So it looks like it's going to be a strong finish to the year, and certainly going to be a very, very strong start to the winter and spring market.
And it's never too early to ask Santa for a new home. So this might be your chance. But if you happen to find yourself on the naughty list, that happens sometimes. You can still reach out and you can talk with Faisal, because there's other ways around it. We can make those dreams happen for you as we head into the holiday season. Let's talk a little bit about affordable housing, Faisal. We know that it's in the news. It seems to be. I was reading an article yesterday talking about the fact that in our own area, anyway, affordable housing seems to be the #1 issue on people's minds, and I wanted to get you to weigh in on that today.
Yes, I have a thought, as I often do, on affordable housing, and I'll share it with you. For decades, Canada has leaned on private developers to tackle housing affordability. So we've incentivized with tax breaks, public land, height exemptions, hoping to get below market units in return. But affordable housing remains scarce, and it often is still too costly for those who need it the most. The solution, in my opinion, is for the government to simply build non-market housing themselves. And what I mean by that is there's a great project right now in Toronto called the Dunn House, Dunn House. It's a supportive housing development, and that shows the approach. It's built on donated land with coordinated government support. It bypasses the profit developers make completely, and it creates that affordable housing. Again, there's municipally owned land, government held land, school properties that are coming back into old, decommissioned schools, or simply donated land. There are a lot of options and opportunities to get some of this donated land from developers who just want to leave a legacy from their estate. And this is an opportunity. So instead of relying on the private sector, Canada could prioritize direct investment in non-market housing. It's practical. It's a proven solution. We see it at the Dunn House. And it just requires a shift in the policy. I think it's just really time to rethink the approach to affordable housing and not dump all the onus on builders and developers and then put the bureaucratic roadblocks up when they're trying to apply for affordable housing. It's just not a smooth process whatsoever.
And I know from the pre-show notes, I was taking a look at something you had written about that for every new affordable home built, there's 39 that are lost. And I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through that other part as well too. Oftentimes we might just jump at and start pointing fingers at the lack of things like rent control and so on. But there's got to be more to it than that, I would think.
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, for every new affordable home built, 39 are lost. And many are quick to point fingers at the lack of rent control for this. But I think the issue is far more complex. Yes, rents are high, but we also need to consider the soaring costs of ownership, construction, and municipal fees. So the expectation that these investors or landlords should provide affordable rents without an adequate return on investment, it just ignores the reality of today's market. You cannot expect landlords, builders, homeowners to construct at today's price, yet charge you rents from 10 years ago.
Right.
So that's kind of what's happening. And we take a lot of criticism and a lot of backlash. In fact, I got an email today from someone saying, stop bringing those Toronto buyers into our region. You're driving up the home values of our region. Well, first of all, thank you very much if you think I'm driving the home values up, because my sellers are very happy to hear that. But secondly, we have to understand this is a reality of where we live. Costs are not going down. Inflation is creating this problem. And I'm not disagreeing. It feels like we are getting overpopulated, but we're going to continue seeing. So municipal fees and taxes have also escalated, which contribute huge to the cost of housing. And I think I've talked about it, that in some municipalities like Toronto, 1/3 of the cost of the housing, new development is actually taxes and municipal fees.
Right.
So it's pretty difficult to get away with it without adjusting those types of. So government support just needs to shift focus, rather than placing the blame solely on investors and landlords. The other solutions like government funded housing, which is nonprofit, non-developer based, on donated land or government existing ownership land, is, I think, the solution to creating that affordable housing. I don't think the solutions that they've been creating up to now and incentivizing builders is going to work, because our costs keep going up.
Right. Right. And I mean, you've been at this game for a long time, and I was going to say too, um, sometimes people just turn to their own abilities and their own ways of trying to solve a problem. And we've talked about things like multi-generational households and those kinds of things. Has that always been there, or has it really been an upswing in the last, say, 3 or 4 years, where people are putting in-law suites, or they're building in, the tiny homes in the backyards, and they're doing all of these other things? How has that changed in our area?
So if you go back 35, I got in the business 36 years ago. So when I first started in the business, there was this sense of delayed gratification. People lived together. Your aunts or uncles came from overseas. They lived with you until they got on their feet. And then that shift occurred probably about 15 years ago,
Right.
where it was instant gratification.
Yeah.
I need it now. I want it now. It's got to be mine. And the government was enabling this by creating more incentives for buyers to be able to go out. Rates came down. Affordability was still in the marketplace. But now that we've seen what has happened over the past few years, we're seeing the shift go back to, okay, I may not get the home I want with the white picket fence today, but I'm willing to settle for something just to get my foot in the real estate door,
Right.
so that I can have a stepping stone to where I want to be eventually. So I think that's going to happen. The multi-generational thing was largely immigrant based in the past, but now I'm seeing mainstream Canadian families born and raised taking that approach. And lastly, we're seeing the money being willed to their kids ahead of time, so that there's an
Right.
opportunity for them to get into something.
And that was a topic we're going to talk about later on in the show. But and I think it kind of speaks to where we're at right now. we look at our own offspring and think we want to make sure that they've still got a leg up in the world, and we'll do whatever we can to help them out. And it's kind of on us to make that happen. And at the same time, do we open up our homes to our to the elderly members of the family? Do we go back to that thought of kind of living our lives like that, where you brought up a good point. It was was that sort of old world thought that it's your responsibility to look after your children, but it's also your children's responsibility to look after you when you're at the other end of life. So interesting times. I get that. There's a lot of interesting areas that we can talk about, but I know that it's a passion for you, and I take a look at that as well too, as a someone who's kind of at that point in his life thinking about what's going to be next for our kids, and it's important for us to do that.
Absolutely. And again, that's where a lot of this financial literacy aspect has to come in. Talk to your kids, make them understand the cost of running a household, what goes into it, what could go wrong, and have contingencies, and just sharing what's going on in a day-to-day environment of home ownership. It's education in itself for our young people.
Absolutely. We'll take a quick break. We're going to get an update from the 570 News Center. When we come back, something I'd never thought about before: fraudulent listings, and whether or not a scam like that could actually impact you. Stay with us here on 570 News Radio.